Hey guys, welcome back to the motorbike channel and my first ride video on KTM's 790 Adventure. This is the 2024 model that's on sale today. This is actually the first KTM I've had on the channel and the first KTM I've ever ridden. So big thanks to Dom and KTM UK for throwing me the keys. I've actually had this for the past week and it goes back in a couple of hours' time. KTM adventure bikes look very different to BMW or Ducati adventure bikes. They've got a very unusual shape to them. They're almost quite fat around the bottom end and quite thin around the top end, which is the reverse to your typical motorbike. And the main reason for that is because KTM adventure bikes don't have the fuel tank up top. They actually have it down the bottom. So this is the majority of the fuel tank. Yes, sure, there is some fuel that sits up here, but the majority sits down low. And obviously, weight down low is a good thing. In some ways, it kind of reminds me of BMW's Boxer engine bikes, like the R12 GS that I had on the channel fairly recently. And when you jump on board, well, it feels very different, at least initially. We'll talk about that very soon. The 790 Adventure is actually KTM's entry-level adventure bike. It's manufactured out in China at the CF Moto plant. And as a result, this retails at a few quid under £9,000. We'll talk more about financing and the cost of it once we get it out on the road. On top of that £9,000 retail price, this particular press bike also has the tech pack, which is about 850 quid. And it includes things like cruise control, the quick shifter plus, and a couple of other bits and pieces. It's fitted with a sort of crossover Pirelli tyre that's designed to work on the road and designed to work off the road. I think it's like a 50-50 tyre. So it doesn't do an amazing job on the road, doesn't do an amazing job off-road, but it will kind of give you a bit of both worlds. And obviously that's what this bike is all about. Another standout design feature of this bike, to tell you that it's a KTM, aside from its lower fuel tank and the KTM orange, is this split headlight. And I have to say, before I picked this bike up and for the first day or two that I had it, I really couldn't get on board with the way it looked. But now I'm about to give it back, the looks have actually really grown on me. And I'm not sure if that's down to the fact that it rides really well, which I don't want to ruin too much, or if it's just like so many radical designs in cars and bikes these days, they do take a little bit of time to sort of get your head around. Now, we all know that KTM have been going through a little bit of a rocky patch lately, and this bike actually comes with a 4-year warranty. I'm not sure if that's as a result of what they've been going through to give their customers more confidence in buying their products. But either way, 4 years on a bike that costs under £9,000, an adventure bike, no less, I think is really, really impressive. We've got an 18-inch wheel on the rear. We've got a 21-inch wheel on the front, although it doesn't look that big, but it is. We've already talked about the fuel tank and where it's mostly located. It's about 20 litres in capacity, so substantially bigger than the 14 or 15 in my F900 GS. We've got all of this lovely protection on the radiator. We've got this aluminium guard that runs underneath the bike, and that is all standard out of the box, which is really nice to see, as is this basic luggage rack on the back. Now, you don't get that sort of thing on a lot of the other manufacturers' bikes. Of course, you can add more extras to this bike and spend more money, but it's nice to see that things like this are standard. In terms of the motor, it's a 790cc V-twin, and it produces 95 horsepower and 88 newton meters of torque. In terms of seat height, it's adjustable between 840 and 860 mils, but it feels substantially lower than that to me. It's a really easy bike to throw your leg over, and I'm sure it's a really good bike and suits shorter riders, which isn't that common on adventure bikes, because something like a R1300 GS, it's a really big bike, even when you've got the lower seat and stuff on it, whereas this one, it's definitely, at least it feels it to me, easier to get on and off. And it weighs about 220 kilos. Now let's head around and have a quick look at the cockpit area. Now, there's a lot of cheaper looking plastics, but they don't upset me as much as they did on that Ducati Multistrada V2S that I had recently, because that costs closer to £20,000, whereas this is under £9,000. So I kind of expect there to be some cheaper looking components. Some things that I don't particularly like are the brake levers. I think they look and feel a little bit cheap, although they are adjustable and they do the job. But this switch gear, although it doesn't look like anything special, it all works really, really well. And I have to say, a special highlight is the actual indicator switch, because when you've got a big, thick set of gloves on, it's sometimes really hard and difficult to feel buttons, especially the indicator, which seems to be quite small on a lot of other manufacturers. Whereas on this one, it's really big and pronounced, and it's really easy to turn on and off. In terms of the actual display, well, it's adjustable, it's relatively clear, and it does a reasonably good job. I wouldn't say it's quite as good as both Ducatis and BMWs. Around the back, we've got a USB socket for power, which is good if you're running a quad lock or something on the handlebars and you want to plug your phone in, then that's going to be really useful. And then we've got this screen, which again does a decent job. It's not adjustable at all, but as with the majority of motorbikes, if you're my height, 1.93 m with a long torso, and your head is, I don't know, somewhere up here, well, I always tend to be just in the wind. Obviously, this is designed to deflect the wind off the rider, but that wind eventually does come back down again. And I think that my head is always in the spot of where that wind comes back down. So if I want to get out of the wind at 70 miles an hour on the motorway, I have to get my head down or crouch a little bit. But again, that's nothing new. That's just tall people problems. This bike also has an old-fashioned key. I don't believe there's a keyless option, but that's not a problem for me. I quite like the old-fashioned key. Once it's in there, once ignition's on, that key can't come out. You know where it is. You're hopefully not going to lose it. Right, let's get my helmet on, jump on the bike, and have some fun.
Now I'm on the bike, I'm in neutral and the stand is up, so I don't need to pull a clutch or anything. I can just hit this starter button here and it fires into life. Like so many modern bikes, it's not that exciting in terms of the startup sequence. Doesn't sound that amazing on tick over. I'm going to leave it in street because, well, we're predominantly going to be on the street, although a little bit later I took it mildly off-roading. That was a couple of days ago, so we'll cut to that very soon. Let's pull the clutch, put it into first gear. It doesn't always go into first gear, I found. That's one small little niggle that I have with this gearbox. Sometimes just doesn't like to engage first, either when you've been stopped for a while and it's been in neutral, or when you're coming up to a junction. It goes down to second and it sometimes won't go into first. You have to really jam it down, and I'm not sure why that is, but it's caught me out a couple of times in the week that I've had this bike. Use that wonderful indicator we just talked about. Bit of a blind junction here, but I'm not too worried because it's a lovely throttle, lovely clutch. Close the visor. I'm going to start by talking about the riding position and the cockpit, if you like, because well, we've already talked about the lack of fuel tank here. Oh, that's a bit of a pothole. But it really does feel peculiar when you first jump on this bike because, well, there's kind of nothing here. I've got used to it now, and I'm sure when I pick my F900 GS up in an hour's time, well, that will probably also feel peculiar now that I'm used to this. And it is quite nice having the space, but I do wonder how tank bags and stuff work on this bike. SW Motec and other tank bag manufacturers have figured out how to work around that, because KTM's, you know, a big part of the market. You do see a lot of KTMs out there, not as many as you do with the GS's, especially when you get onto the Alps. It's just like a GS fest, and I guess that's maybe one negative of having a GS, is you're just another GS, whereas when you're on a KTM, well, it's a bit of a rarer bike, at least in this scene, not when you get to the motocross scene. I mean, that's where I know KTM from all my life. They've been dominating in motocross and supercross and best riders in the world, and recent years, they've been in MotoGP, maybe not dominating in MotoGP, but they've definitely been a force to be reckoned with. But I've been really comfortable. I've not done many massive rides on this bike, but I can tell you now that I could sit on here for hours and hours if I wanted to, and I would be very, very comfortable. We've already mentioned the screen, and if I get down just a couple of inches, I'm completely out the wind. But if I sit up in my normal riding position, Lanky Joe position, then I am feeling the wind. I think this is a nice section of road coming up, so maybe we should talk about the handling of this bike, because that is definitely something that I can't not talk about, because it's brilliant. It's really, really good. Again, I'd read about the handling of this bike and the nice low fuel tank, and it just changes direction so well, it really does. It's just a real joy. And I found myself braking and going too slow into corners on this bike, because when I get there, it just lays down so easily. Like this corner here, I'm slowing down a bit too easily or too much, because it just gobbles it up with no issues whatsoever. Really, really does handle beautifully well, whether you've got a full fuel tank or an empty one. And that's something, as a new motorcyclist, that I've noticed a lot. In fact, I notice it in cars as well. My M2 Club Sport track car, when that's got a full tank of fuel, I can feel that extra weight. But on a motorbike, that extra 20 litres, or what's that, 15, 16 kilos, you notice that when it's up high. But when it's down low, well, it's almost impossible to notice. So it's a really, really clever design, but it does kind of ruin the aesthetics of the bike, in my opinion. Like I said, I've warmed to how this bike looks, but I don't love the way it looks. I'm sure there'll be KTM owners in the comments now attacking me, saying that I'm completely wrong, and maybe I am completely wrong. I've got a Sao Paulo yellow F900 GS, so I could be the one that's in the wrong. The gearbox. Now, we've already mentioned that first gear can be a little bit notchy and tricky at times, but anything beyond that is okay. But it's not the best gearbox in the world. It's not the most slick gearbox in the world. It's a little bit notchy everywhere. You know when you're in or out of gear, but it's all just a little bit agricultural. And this has got the quick shifter plus on it, but it's nothing as good as something that I've experienced on a BMW or a Ducati, that's for sure. But remember, this is under 9,000, no, it's under 10,000 pounds, because it's got the tech pack which has the quick shifter plus. So this is under 10,000 pounds. My expectations can't be too high. I've had some serious exotica recently, like the Multistrada V4S with a few toys, and I can't remember the retail on that, but it was well over £20,000, which is 2.5 times the price of this. So I've got to put things into perspective and remember that this bike is built to a cost, and it does feel it in some ways, but it also is really, really impressive. The brakes, I'm not sure if they're sort of KTM branded Brembos, but they work relatively well. I'm not over the moon with the actual front brake lever or the foot pegs, actually. None of the foot pegs, the gear peg or the rear brake peg. Just all a little bit, I don't know, they just feel a little bit cheap even on your feet. So I think the touch points, the levers and the foot pegs could definitely be better. My BMW started out at, what was it, £12,300, but the full retail before the discount I got was it closer to £16,000, so 3.5 or 4 grand's worth of options on that bike, and you could still get lots of options, 719 bits, etc, etc. So there's always room to expand at every price point with every manufacturer. Let's talk about the 790 Twin. as we come into a village. Let's turn around and talk about the 790 Twin. Right, let's pick things up a bit. Yeah, it goes when you ask it to go. Once again proving that even under 100 horsepower is enough. It is for the road, and for someone who's only been riding a couple of years, it's definitely enough. It never feels underpowered. It's got lovely torque from about 2,500-3,000 RPM, fourth gear, and you can pull it and it just takes off. It's really, really nice. And the way it changes direction. Oh yes. It's a joy. It's a real joy to ride this bike. It doesn't have the best engine note. In fact, of all the V twins that I've ridden, it's probably the least sonorous, and most of that is because I can't actually hear it, and also the fact that I've literally just fitted that Arrow link pipe to my F900 GS, and that bike sounds unreal now. Oh, bit of off-roading, oh yeah baby. Actually, this is probably a good time to cut to me a couple of days ago when I took this bike off-roading. Right, this is the first time I've ever been green laning on any type of vehicle, and it's the first time I've been off-road on a motorbike since I was about 20 years old. Must admit, it does feel a little bit naughty because, well, I feel like I shouldn't be here, but it's definitely a green lane. I did a lot of research. Let's play around with the modes. Off-road. Quick shift it on. Okay, so now we're in off-road. And I haven't played around with the settings, but by default when you put it in off-road, it turns the ABS off on the rear wheel. So I can do skids, but I've still got ABS on the front brake, and I've still got traction control. When you do a bit of green laning or off-roading, you should in theory stand up. A bit like I used to do on the mountain bike. Although it was very different to being on a motorbike, I think my off-road capabilities are okay. They're not horrendous. Off-roading on a motorbike! Oh, this feels cool. Very cool. Oh, it's a little bit slicker here. It's just... oh, maybe the rear traction is off. That definitely spun up then. Oh, looking at his face expression, I don't think I am meant to be here. Thank you. Oh, she was a bit smilier. Oh, am I going to squeeze through here? Ah, that's what the brake and clutch guards are for. Or hand guards. They protect your fingers. I should at least have my visor closed here, shouldn't I, really? I'm such a beginner. There we go. Yeah, baby. We'll do one more big skid down here, just because. Oh yeah, man. I am so cool. I'm being sarcastic, just in case you thought I was being serious. Well, hopefully you enjoyed that. I just thought I had the opportunity. I think it was a motorbike friendly green lane. I've since asked a few people and had a 50-50 response, so yeah, apologies if it wasn't. But this bike very quickly showed me that it feels great off-road, as I would expect on a KTM. That's one area where I figured that this bike would be really, really good, and to me as an amateur, on-road and off-road really, the bike felt really, really nice, very capable, and that low down weight again meant that it never felt top heavy, or it never felt the sort of 220 kilos that it is, because that's a lot heavier than a mountain bike that I'm used to. And when things start going wrong balance wise, they go wrong very quickly. Suspension on the road and off the road actually feels really good. It's not adjustable on the front fork. Changing the forks because they're too soft or too hard, or you want adjustable forks, then probably look at the 890. The rear shock. Well, I haven't really played around with it, but I think you can change the preload on the spring, and I think you can play around with the rebound on it. But that's pretty much it. So again, that's where you start to see that this bike is under 10 grand. There's not much to play around with. Saying that though, when you go into the various drive or ride modes, you can play around with things like the ABS, the traction control or the slide control, so actually allow you, a bit like in a BMW modern M car, you've got the M traction control, and that allows you to go sideways to a certain point before the electronics start helping you out if you run out of talent. And it looks like that's the same with this bike. I didn't experiment with that because I don't have the talent, I didn't have the space. Hopefully one day I can actually figure out and experience what that does, because I'm sure it's very advanced being a KTM again. Let's just talk about the price of this bike once again, because although at just under £9,000 base price, it does seem to represent very good value in the, let's call it, middleweight adventure bike class. But, and there is a but, if you're looking at financing one of these, once again, KTM UK were very quick and happy to show me a typical finance quote, which I believe has just been adjusted and reduced. You're looking at £1,500 in and £109 per month over 37 months, and that's up to 4,000 miles a year. If you're a car guy or girl, that doesn't sound like much, but actually if you live in the UK and you own a motorbike, even if you go on adventures, 4,000 to 5,000 miles is going some, so don't worry about that too much. The problem is it doesn't have good residuals, and so after those 3 years this bike is worth exactly 50%, £4,500. Therefore you're actually paying off a fair chunk of it. Now if we compare that to, let's say, BMW's F800 GS, which I think is a direct competitor to this bike from BMW, that retails base price at £9,995, so exactly £1,000 more than this. But although the BMW is £1,000 more retail, if you're financing the F800 GS on the same terms, 37 months, 4,000 miles, £1,500 in, actually works out at £103 a month. So it's £7 cheaper. And that's because the residuals on the F800 GS are better than they are on this bike. Although on the face of it, it's not an expensive bike. If you're buying it outright, then it's actually very good value in my mind. And I'm sure, I'm not certain, but I'm sure you could probably get a little bit more off at the dealer. At least with the majority of BMWs, you can always squeeze a few hundred extra quid. The margins aren't massive on these things, but you can always squeeze a little bit more money out of them. It's not always as simple as cheaper bike, cheaper monthlies. If the bike itself has better residuals, then the monthlies might not be as high as you think. I think I've said that the right way around. Right, now the difficult bit. My conclusion on this bike. If you'd asked me after the first or even second day of having this bike what I thought of it, it wouldn't have been massively glowing. I didn't like the way it looked. All I could focus on was the negatives. I couldn't get used to the lack of tank here, and just nothing seemed familiar. And then other things started to annoy me, and like that first gear issue that I've had only a couple of times, and I'm sure that probably gets fixed very quickly with a bit of clutch adjustment, or maybe it's just something I'm doing wrong. But there are all these little things that were kind of niggling away at me, and therefore giving me a little bit of a negative outlook on this bike. I then spent a couple of days off it because I was busy doing car stuff and life stuff, and then I came back to it a couple of days ago and I took it off-road. And I started to understand it and appreciate it more. And then I thought to myself, actually, for the money, it kind of ticks all the boxes you want it to tick. Sure, I can't wait to get back on my F900 GS and ride that home in about 20 minutes time. But I've really grown to appreciate what this bike is all about. It does everything really well, especially at the price point. And I think that's the main thing. I keep going back to the price, but it's something that we can't avoid talking about because it is priced really, really well in today's market. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give us a thumbs up. Leave any comments and questions below, and make sure you subscribe because it's free to do so. And the more subscribers I've got, the more chances I have of getting myself on more bikes and making more videos and bringing it to the channel for you lot. Until the next one, take it easy and I'll see you soon. Woo-hoo-hoo! Here we are, back safe and sound, KTM. Right then, I had finished the video, but the guys down here at KTM UK had just pointed out that this seat is actually adjustable height-wise, which kind of doesn't surprise me now because when I first got the bike I did feel like I was sitting really low, but I did get used to it. Now they've lifted it up, looks like it's about an inch higher or so, inch and a half, but I've already thrown my leg over and it feels substantially taller and more like what I'm used to, so I'm going to take it around the block. But before I do, they've wheeled out my F900 GS, which I haven't seen for a week, and it's just really bizarre seeing both the bikes together because, as we talked about a lot in this video, the fuel tank is obviously down the bottom and the weight of the bike, the girth of the bike, is down towards the floor, which is good for handling, etc. But I'm not sure if it's great in terms of aesthetics. It's definitely hard to get your head around, it looks very different. But when you look at my F900, it literally looks like the bike's been turned upside down. It looks so big up top, and in fact a lot taller overall. Looks like a massive bike. Oh well, straight away it feels so different. I mean, literally I can't be more than about an inch or two higher, but it feels like a different bike. This feels way more familiar to me. I kind of wish now that I had it in this seat height the whole time I had the bike because I feel way more comfortable. I got used to that low seat height before, but this feels wonderful. Oh yes, excellent. And it's completely adjustable manually. It takes about 15 seconds. You literally remove the seat and just change it to where it sort of mounts at the front here. Takes no time at all. You don't need a different seat, don't need to spend any more money. And that's obviously in the intro when I talked about the 840 and 860mm seat height. That's what the literature was talking about. I should have looked into that. But anyway, there you go. We're now on the taller seat height and the bike feels even better for taller riders. And yet when I come to a stop, so let's just do that down here. When I come to this roundabout, there's nobody behind. I'll just come to a complete stop. There's still nobody behind. I mean, it's really easy to reach the floor. I can keep the bike nice and upright. There you go. Happy days. Well, big thanks to the guys at KTM for pointing that out, and yeah, thanks to them for letting me take the bike back out again and experiencing it with the slightly higher seat, because it definitely feels better as a taller rider. It feels way more familiar. I think if I'd ridden it off like this to begin with, the whole thing would have felt a lot more familiar. So yeah, that's great. Really, really good. Right, now I'm going to say goodbye. Goodbye.